So none of us like getting ripped off. So this video, we're just going to look at some of the ways that garages rip people off. But we've got to accept sometimes that garages are just there to make money. Sometimes things happen and we can come away feeling ripped off. So what we're going to do is look at the common areas where things go wrong and you end up with a much higher bill than you thought you would. And then we're going to look at some of the best strategies and methods of avoiding these overcharges or these problems and issues, and when you take your car in to have some work done on it. Now, I'll be really interested to know if you do work on the car yourself or whether you always take it into a garage. It will save you a lot of money if you can learn how to do little jobs on your car, little maintenance tasks. Most of them are quite easy to do. They just require a bit of time, the right tools, and a little bit of instruction. The internet now has a mass of resources available just to help us to modify, upgrade, and correct problems that we've got on our car ourselves, with step-by-step guides and videos as well on YouTube. Bear in mind that businesses need to make money to survive. A garage is not a charity. Your local mechanic is not doing it for favours for a mate. He's got to earn a living out of doing this. So he is going to charge you for his time. And often when you spend time on a car, things tend to escalate. Problems tend to get bigger. I've heard people say that often the mechanic is just creating work for next time. You take it in with one problem and then it comes out and develops another fault. So is that true? Well, there probably are some unscrupulous mechanics out there that do this. But in the main, in fairness, we've all done it ourselves. You work on your car, you take off a plastic clip, and just because it is old and has degraded, it's more prone to fail when it's reattached. So often these problems come about just purely through the fact that you've updated something on the car and you've removed other things that have become rather worn and rather brittle. So it's often a good strategy whenever you have work done on a car not to cut corners, to use new clamps, new hoses wherever possible. It obviously depends a lot on the work that you have done. The other thing is some people add performance parts to their car and then they develop another fault further down the line. It doesn't mean that that performance part has created the fault. That fault was there already and it's only starting to show up now because you're asking more from the engine or from the car. So that weakness would have to have been addressed further down the line. You may well have got another 6,000 miles out of it, but that fault was usually there already. So don't always blame your mechanic or the upgrade parts for the fault or problem on your car. It's just the nature of cars. Things do tend to go wrong and there's often a knock-on effect when you start changing things around. So some garages, it's just outright fraud. They make up work that you do not need to have done. They over exaggerate the need to get a part replaced or updated, or they claim to have done work that they just haven't on the car and charge you for it. So you've really got to be wary of these unscrupulous motor traders out there. Thankfully, they are few and far between. Let me know your experiences if you've ever met an unscrupulous motor trader. Probably best not to mention names, but let us know your experiences and how you sorted out the problem. But we're going to look at ways of avoiding those unscrupulous characters later on in this video. So main dealers, we all love them, don't we? A lot of people like myself go to the main dealer just to get the stamp in the service book. When you come to sell a car that's a few years old, people tend to expect a main dealer service stamp. So that's really why people go to the main dealer, to have it serviced and maintained. But as the car gets older, that becomes less and less necessary. So you can probably get away with not going to the main dealer. So an experience I had with my main dealer, they told me that my brake pads needed replacing. They quoted me £1,500 to have the brake pads and brake discs replaced. So it came up as red on the report. It told me I'd used 80% of the life of these items. So by my reckoning, 20% of the cost they were quoting was about £300. So they're asking me to throw away £300. Now, those brake pads and brake discs, I don't know when they were last changed, but they look like the original ones that were on the car. So they've covered over 50,000 miles. So last year they told me it was 80% worn. This year they've told me it's 85% worn. So I've lost another 5% wear and tear in those brakes. So if I'd replaced them last year, I would definitely have had an easy year's run of life out of them. So a lot of components on the car, you can keep an eye on them yourself when you start to notice that they're starting to get to the end of their life. So with brake pads, you'll get a characteristic squeal forming when they start to run right down. So that's the point where you should start to panic. A lot of cars have brake pad wear indicators that come up on the dashboard to indicate it's time to change the brakes. So think carefully about what the garage or mechanic is telling you. If it's used up 80 or 85% of its life, it's still got 20 or 15% of its life left. And if that's something that's going to last you more than a year, it's not really something you have to worry about. So how do you prevent these situations where garages and mechanics just rip you off? So the first thing is always shopping around. Get multiple quotes for the work from different garages. Those wide boys that charge an absolute fortune for the work or overestimate the cost of it will become quite apparent, because you'll notice that the other quotes and estimates are much lower or more reasonable, or what you would expect. Garage hourly rates vary wildly. Here in the UK, I've been charged as low as £40 an hour for garage work. And I've also seen companies charging upwards of £140 per hour. So just changing the garage that you go to makes a significant difference. Main dealer service costs tend to be much higher than your local garage down the industrial estate. So if you're just getting a brake pad changed or a brake disc changed, you wouldn't really want to be paying the expertise of the labour figure from the main dealers when you can get the same job done much more cheaply locally. So choose a garage as well that belongs to a reputable motor trade association. So most countries have got some body that governs mechanics or the motor trade. So if they belong to that association, you've usually got a course to redress a problem or escalate a problem, and they usually have a standard that they have to meet. They're often checked and go through a rigorous vetting process to get into some of these associations. So the Retail Motor Industry Federation and the Motor Ombudsman. So if the garage has those logos, they are probably a member of these organisations. So that would go some way to assure you that you're not going to get ripped off. Also, they may have affiliations with motoring organisations like the AA and the RAC. So again, that can be an indicator that they're a higher quality garage. These associations don't want to be tarnished with dodgy motor traders. So they're usually more vigorous in their vetting procedure to make sure that people that they list and recommend are up to the required standard. So even your local garage can still use genuine parts if that was your worry. And here in the UK, the regulation is such that you can't be penalised on your warranty. A main dealer cannot insist that your car is maintained by the main dealer, as long as you've had the work done by a reputable garage or mechanic. There may be some stipulation in an attached insurance policy, which you obviously need to follow. But in the main, you can get your car serviced and maintained wherever, and it shouldn't really affect any warranty claims that you make against the manufacturer. But that will depend on where you live and what laws are in place or what laws they're all working to. Here in the UK, we've got the 1982 Supply of Goods and Services Act, which would also cover any interactions that you have with your local mechanics or your local garages. So a sad fact is that women often get fobbed off by garages. They often assume that a woman doesn't really know. And there are women out there that know more than a lot of men about cars and that sort of thing. So when you take your car in, get a good overview of the sort of work that's involved. Talk technical to the mechanic about the car. It just lets them know that you're more clued up and that you're not the sort of person that can be ripped off. Or take a knowledgeable friend along with you to discuss the work that needs to be done before they actually start work on the car. A great thing is to find a good local garage and stick with them. Building up a reputation with them over the time and building trust with your local mechanic goes a long way, and they often go the extra mile. So whereas if you come in off the street, they might charge you for a little job. If you're a regular customer, they may well put a part on the car for free of charge. The local garage that I go to will change a wiper blade or stick a bulb in for you. If you're a regular customer, it's just part of the service. So they do it as a goodwill gesture to keep you coming back. Always use a garage that's been recommended or a mechanic that's been recommended. That obviously goes a long way. The forums online are a great place to go if you're having specialist work done on your car. There's probably other people out there that are looking to have the same work done on their car. So just comparing notes and getting a list of people that have done a good job can go some way to preventing you from hitting these problems and difficulties that you hit down the line. So here's a tip. If you're not that sure of the garage, ask them to keep the parts that they're taking off the car. So that first of all gives you a chance to get those parts inspected. Were they really worn? were they really damaged? So they're obviously not going to rip you off if they know you've got the original part. Also, if they're just saying they've replaced parts, they can't do that anymore because they're giving you the part. The downside of that is you might come away with a bag of parts that you then have to dispose of, but that can be a good defense or a good protection in some situations, and it just makes it harder for the unscrupulous mechanic to rip you off. So an old tip was leaving a workshop manual in the car. Now with the internet, no one really buys workshop manuals anymore, but just sounding knowledgeable when you talk to the mechanic about the problem, getting a good overview, maybe going online, researching the problem and suggesting to the mechanic some areas where the problem could manifest itself, and just ask him to check those areas or what he thinks. So you're talking at a more technical level with him. Never go into a garage, give them your keys and say, just do whatever it needs and I'll settle up at the end of the day. That is like writing a blank check. You're probably going to get a much higher bill from an unscrupulous motor trader than was necessary just because you've done that. So when you take your car in, always get the work properly quoted and estimated. So an estimate is often a bit flexible in people's minds, so they can estimate it might cost 500. But when you go to pick the car up, it actually cost 1,000 because there was lots of other things. There's other little extras that often get added on, like the sales tax. A lot of garages will add the sales tax on to the figure that they give you. So just make sure that any figures that have been quoted are fully inclusive and the price you pay. Get it in writing. If you're going to the garage for a very specific reason, make a list of all the work that you want to have done on the car and give them that list to work through. And again, that avoids any misunderstandings. You've effectively got a written contract then from them to work from. So another simple thing is just to get a second opinion. The mechanic or the garage is saying, look, this needs to be replaced, it's potentially quite dangerous. Phone a friend, phone another garage, get another mechanic to look at it and just verify that that is true, and maybe get a second quote for the work. When you start getting multiple quotes, garages often start trying to compete and often give discounts that weren't there already. Another problem that I see quite a lot is people walk in to get something done on the car and they basically pay the off the street prices. Most businesses and hotels, for example, will charge you a much higher rate if you just walk in off the street. I had an instance where I was buying tyres long time ago, and I was quoted quite a ridiculous price when I drove in with the car needing tyres. I'd looked online on this company's website and got a quote that was about £100 cheaper. I actually went back and made the booking online and saved myself £100. So a lot of people would have just been ripped off and paid that walk-in off the street price, which is often much higher than you can get online. And also in the UK, we have an annual test. We call it the MOT. Now there's MOT testing stations that are just there to test the car. If you take your car into there, you won't have an opportunity to be ripped off by them being overly strict on the car's condition because they're trying to drum up a bit of work for themselves. But sometimes you take your car into a garage that does work and the MOT, and they might be more inclined to flag up a problem or an issue. So people that do MOTs are quite heavily regulated. The people that issue the MOT testing station certification would be quite eager to hear if you've been ripped off by a garage trying to do that, when maybe you've taken the car somewhere else and they've said that's not a problem, or you've got the car through an MOT and this first garage was trying to charge you extra for it. So I just hope this video has given you a bit of an overview of some of the things that can go wrong. It's often miscommunication. We shouldn't assume that all mechanics are rip-off merchants. Most mechanics that I deal with and speak to and have had working on my car have been really honest and have bent over backwards to try and help with the problem. Some have even done extra work and not charged me the full hourly rate, just as a gesture of goodwill. They felt sorry for me. So it really does pay to get a good garage. When you've got one, they're like gold dust. Stick with them, but learn to do work on the car yourself. You'll save a lot of money, and it's quite satisfying working on the car yourself. So if this video has been useful to you, please boot that like button and subscribe to the channel, because we would love you to stay tuned. And I've lined this video up for you that goes in depth into more car maintenance problems and issues. Thanks for watching.